I can't say when life began to come apart. It wasn't one blow. It was a slow rain of losses, soft, steady, soaking everything before I realized I was drenched. One day I woke up, and nothing carried the same meaning. The laughter I knew sounded far away. Plans felt like they belonged to someone else. Something inside me had gone dim. I tried to move forward as if nothing had changed, but the soul can't pretend for long. Soon, that terrible thought arrived and sat on my chest. This is over. I didn't say it aloud, but I thought it 1,000 times. Everything felt finished. Dreams, faith, desire. There's a kind of exhaustion that isn't in the bones. It's in the spirit. You walk, you speak, you show up, but your insides are empty. I reached that place. I remember sitting by a window staring without seeing, holding that blend of sadness and resignation only those who've lost more than they can count truly know. Prayers turned into silence. Answers didn't come. I tried reading the Bible, but the words didn't touch me. Deep down, I knew God was there, but I couldn't feel him, like an invisible wall stood between us, so I let my arms fall. I surrendered, not in rebellion, but from sheer fatigue. If this is the end, let it be what it must be, I thought. For weeks I lived on autopilot. The world moved. My soul hung still. I had learned to smile without joy, to say I'm fine without believing it. No one notices when you go dark inside. The world is busy. And yet within that inner quiet, something began to stir, small as an ember refusing to die. One night, trying to sleep, I found myself crying. Not loud, tired tears. For the first time in a long time, I didn't ask God for anything. I just wept. It was my way of telling him, I'm still here, even if I don't understand. That weeping became the truest prayer I'd prayed, and something in the air changed, only a light calm, as if someone had tucked an invisible blanket around me. Not a voice, not a visible miracle, but presence. I woke the next morning to the same routine with a different feeling. I still didn't understand, but I no longer felt completely alone. Maybe miracles begin like that, not with circumstances shifting, but with a small awakening of the heart. That day, without planning to, I opened the Bible again. My eyes stopped on Psalm 34. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted. I read it slowly, as if for the first time. Near. It didn't promise the avoidance of pain. It promised proximity, and somehow that was enough. I began talking to him again. No formalities, no speeches. I told him what I felt, even what I couldn't make sense of. Sometimes I said nothing at all, knowing silence could also be prayer. Little by little, the wall I had built began to crack, not because I tore it down, but because his love turned it to dust from the other side. As days passed, I noticed small flashes of life, an unexpected conversation, a song, a clearer sunrise. Not coincidences, reminders. It was as if God were saying in gestures, I'm not finished with you yet. There, between weariness and hope, I learned something that changed the way I see the world. Sometimes the miracle doesn't arrive when everything is going well, but when nothing is left. When the soul is finally empty enough to make room for God to enter completely. That night before sleep, I whispered from somewhere deep, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's the beginning wearing ruin as a disguise. And for the first time in a long time, I rested. The days that followed didn't bring big changes. Same streets, same voices, same absences. But something in me had shifted. I no longer walked with despair, but with a new quiet, as if I'd discovered the value of silence. I made peace with not having answers. I realized not everything that hurts needs an explanation. Sometimes pain exists to make space. I started paying attention, hearing sounds I used to ignore. Birdsong, wind in the trees, the soft rattle of water at a boil. Little things, almost invisible, that reminded me life continued. And with each tiny signal, something inside me rearranged, as if God were rebuilding my soul piece by piece in quiet. One afternoon at the park, I saw an elderly woman feeding pigeons. Her serenity struck me. She wasn't rushed. She didn't check the time. She was simply there, present. Like each crumb carried meaning. Her face held a peace that didn't depend on circumstances. I watched a few minutes and tears filled my eyes. That was what I longed for. Not a perfect life, but a life at peace. That night, praying, I said something different. I didn't ask things to change. I said, "God, teach me to see." It was short, but honest. And in time I realized he answered, not by changing my surroundings, but by changing my eyes. I began noticing what I had called trivial. A call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a message arriving the moment I needed it, a line in a book that seemed written to me. Not coincidences, glimmers, God drawing near in ways I hadn't known how to recognize. Some nights fear returned. I lay down with a restless heart, rehearsing losses, wondering if it was worth believing. Each time by some path, a lyric, a word, a thought, something consoled me, as though heaven kept reminding me gently, I'm not finished. One evening I stepped onto the balcony. The sky burned orange and violet. Suddenly a certainty clear as breath settled over me. The miracle was already on its way, even if unseen. Not emotion, conviction. Something in me knew the story wouldn't end in rubble. I began to write what I felt each day, not to analyze, but to accompany it. Rereading pages later, I noticed a change. My words had shifted. They were no longer complaints. They were prayers. They no longer narrated emptiness. They traced a process. Without realizing it, faith had moved back into my heart. Not shouting, but taking root. This faith was different than before, quieter, more mature, more real. I used to think faith meant certainty without doubt. Now I knew faith is walking even while doubt walks beside you. Trusting God is working while the sky appears closed. And so, without planning, I began to see small miracles. Not the kind that rearrange the world in an instant, but the kind that reshape a soul over time. Miracles that don't make noise, sleeping without fear, feeling gratitude for a new day, forgiving myself, smiling for no reason. Small, but deep. One night, watching a candle flame, I thought how a single light fills a room. That was the miracle. A small light in my darkness, enough to take another step. I didn't need to see the future. I needed to see the next foothold. I learned miracles don't always look like we imagine. Sometimes they don't restore what you lost. They teach you to live without it. They don't return what left. They show you can be whole another way. The miracle doesn't always change reality. It changes your heart. That night, closing my eyes, I felt something I had missed for a long time. Hope. Unhurried, unforced hope. I didn't know how or when, but I knew something beautiful was being born out of all that hurt. Deep down, I knew with certainty the miracle had already begun. Days grew brighter, not because problems were solved, but because my sight had learned to see differently. I discovered miracles rarely announce themselves with thunder. They arrive softly, almost imperceptibly. They begin inside, like a seed splitting soil in silence. My soul felt like that, germinating after winter. I no longer woke with emptiness. There was still uncertainty, but also calm. The soul, tired of resisting, had learned to float. I rose, opened the window, breathed deeply and whispered, "Thank you." I didn't know why, only that gratitude was right. And each time I gave thanks, the day changed color. Slowly, things began to move. Stuck situations loosened. People I thought gone returned with words I needed. Others drifted away quietly, like leaves a tree no longer requires. At first I didn't understand. Then I did. The miracle also clears what clutters. There was a rainy afternoon I'll never forget. I ran for shelter and watched the drops stitch the street with silver. A soaked child ran past, grinning. He looked at me and said, "Why don't you come out? It's only water." Then he laughed and raced back into the downpour. "It's only water." The line struck like lightning. I realized how long I'd been fleeing anything that discomforted me, as if suffering would undo me. Maybe the miracle wasn't avoiding the rain, but learning to walk beneath it. I stepped out and let it soak me, cold on the skin, freedom in the bones. It felt like a baptism from the sky, as if God were saying, "Live without fear. I'm with you." From that day, something deep shifted. I spoke more honestly, lived more surrendered, trusted more fully. My prayers stopped being pleas and turned into conversation. I no longer asked why, I asked for what. That one word changed everything. Meaning appeared where I had only seen loss. During prayer one day, I felt urged to visit someone I'd avoided for a long time. We had parted badly, wounds remained. I didn't know what I'd say, but I went. When I saw them, words didn't come, only tears. We embraced, no explanations, no accusations, just forgiveness. There I understood, the miracle is also called reconciliation. It wasn't spectacular, but something healed inside me. I learned miracles aren't always visible. Sometimes they happen when you can finally love where resentment once lived, when you can look back without pain, when a wound stops bleeding and becomes a scar. And on each scar, God writes a promise. One night I read the first pages of my journal. I barely recognized the person who wrote those lines, soaked in despair. It felt like looking at an old photograph of someone I no longer am. I didn't feel shame or grief, only tenderness. That broken version of me had opened a path to truer faith. With tears in my eyes, I wrote one sentence. "Thank you for not ending things where I thought everything ended." From then on, I recognized God everywhere, in a shared smile, a sunrise, the smell of fresh bread. I understood the greatest miracle is not the world changing, but you changing. And when you change, the world changes with you. Hope became something different, not expecting everything to go well, but knowing that, whatever happens, you will be well. What is coming, even if it hurts, will bring light. God does not improvise. What feels like delay today will look like precision tomorrow. Without knowing when, the miracle became visible, not as an event, but as a state of soul. A deep peace wrapped me whenever I remembered I had survived the darkest hour. Where everything had seemed finished, something new had begun. This certainty didn't shout, it breathed. The miracle hadn't arrived from outside, it rose from within. And with it came a simple, powerful truth. When you think it's the end, God is just beginning. It unfolded like dawn. First a timid blush, then light filling every corner. Outwardly, little had changed. Inwardly, everything had. I noticed it in how I looked at the world, in how I inhaled the morning. The weight in my chest was gone. A steady peace remained, the kind you learn by trusting without knowing how it will all resolve. I realized a miracle is sometimes a transformation so deep, only the soul can recognize it. No trumpets, no spectacle, just awakening. Awareness that shows you God in everything, a simple conversation, the aroma of coffee, an embrace offered with no questions asked. I began living with attention and gratitude for the small. The more I thanked, the more I found to thank for. Gratitude doesn't change circumstances, it changes the heart living them. Where I once saw routine, I now saw miracle. Where I once felt weariness, I now felt purpose. At dusk, I watched a child run a kite. The wind carried it higher, sent it wheeling. This is life lived by faith, I thought. You don't control the wind, you trust the one holding the line. I saw my mistake. I'd tried to steer everything. I wanted to predict, ensure, understand. But miracles happen when you release control and let God's love carry you where you could never go on your own. I noticed that what I'd lost wasn't punishment. It was space. What left, what broke, what ended, had made room for something larger. Closed doors had spared me roads that weren't mine. The silences that hurt so much became the ground where faith germinated. God hadn't been silent. He'd been working deep within. One afternoon, a piece of news arrived and I smiled without knowing how to stop. Something I had hoped for a long time, something that seemed impossible, finally came. Not coincidence, confirmation. A quiet sign that God always fulfills, often differently than we imagine. I looked at the sky with tears of recognition. The miracle happened, I thought, not just the one I could see, but all the ones that had been happening inside me along the way. I began to live with a lighter, steadier faith. I didn't ask for everything to be easy. I asked to learn from whatever came. Life would not always be simple, but I would never be alone again. That certainty was the greatest miracle. I started sharing my story, not for attention, but from gratitude. Telling it was my way of saying, God is still at work. Every time someone found comfort in it, I glimpsed the purpose behind my pain. What had been my ruin became my testimony. What once broke me now helped lift others. The miracle doesn't end when it happens. It begins when you pass it on. One night I found a line I'd written months earlier. Maybe this isn't the end. I closed my eyes and smiled. It wasn't a maybe anymore. It wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. A deep calm settled in. I stopped treating life as a sequence of trials to overcome and began honoring it as a sacred journey where every step holds meaning. Even gray days belong to the design. The miracle isn't only in what gets resolved, it's in what gets understood. Faith, I learned, isn't about waiting for a particular result. It's about learning to see God in every result. That changed everything. I stopped chasing spectacular signs and found miracles in the ordinary. An honest conversation, a dawn after a hard night, unexplainable peace. The greatest miracle wasn't that circumstances changed, it was that I changed. The same heart that only knew how to ask learned how to give thanks. The heart that feared endings learned to bless beginnings, and I knew life would test me again, but I would not fear. Once you witness a miracle, you know the impossible can bloom. That night I looked at the stars from my window. Clear, silent. I thought of everything I'd lived and whispered. Thank you, God, for being there when I thought you weren't. Thank you for making me wait long enough to understand. Thank you that when everything seemed finished, the miracle happened. After the miracle, life went on, yet nothing was the same. Simple things shone with a gentle polish, as if a soft rain had washed them. I walked the same streets with eyes of gratitude. Nothing looked changed, and everything was different. The miracle didn't hand me a perfect life. It gave me a life with meaning. I began living with the certainty that each day carries its own grace. I worried less about tomorrow and stopped torturing myself with yesterday. I learned to trust the present, the place God always is. Faith, I discovered, isn't counting on nothing going wrong. It's knowing you won't be alone when it does. Sometimes I caught myself telling my story without planning to, in a casual conversation, a letter, a look. I wasn't speaking from the wound anymore, but from the healing. When you share the process honestly, you aren't really talking about yourself. You're talking about the faithfulness of God. Every word carried the echo of His love, the love that held me when I thought all was lost. One afternoon, I noticed a woman on a park bench crying quietly, hoping no one would see. I sat beside her without a word. I didn't ask what was wrong. I didn't need to. I'd been there, in that inner place where nothing feels fixable. After a while, she glanced over, surprised I hadn't left. I smiled and said, "You're not alone." I don't know if those words helped her, but as I spoke them, I knew God was speaking them to me again. I remembered something essential. Miracles don't stop with us. They move through us. They aren't for hoarding. They're for offering. God didn't lift me only to restore me. He lifted me so I could help hold others. What was once my desert became a spring. What once was weeping became comfort. I joined a small support group. At first, I only listened. Soon I learned listening is often enough. Watching hope return to other faces confirmed the miracle was alive, multiplying through every shared story. The true miracle doesn't end when it appears. It expands when it's given away. At dawn one day, I remembered the first time I felt everything was over. The silence, the loneliness, the ache I thought would never end. Without that night, I wouldn't know the light that walks with me now. The miracle didn't erase my past, it redeemed it. God didn't change my story, He changed the meaning of my story. I began to write about it, not for applause, but as witness. Each sentence was a prayer of thanks. I wrote how God sometimes seems late, but arrives exactly on time. How the endings we dread often hold the deepest beginnings. How a soul, when it yields to His will, discovers even pain can become a language of love. Weariness still visits, uncertainty and nostalgia too. But now I know what to do. Don't resist. Don't run. Breathe and remember. Remember what He has done. Remember purpose. Remember the miracle isn't an isolated event. It's a way of living. I began blessing what I once cursed. Delays, losses, silences. Because I learned those are God's workshop, where nothing appears to move and yet the soul is being shaped by invisible hands. True faith doesn't demand explanations. It trusts. And when you trust, what seemed a weight becomes lift. One night, as the wind moved the curtains, I found myself praying again without petitions. Only thank you. Thank you for holding me. Thank you for allowing what broke to be remade. Thank you for not answering when I wanted, but when I was ready. Thank you for turning the impossible into testimony. A deep peace settled. Wordless. Complete. Like a soul finally sitting where it belongs. I understood. The miracle wasn't a coincidence or a reward. It was love. Love you don't earn, you receive. Love that doesn't depend on what you do, but on who He is. I fell asleep with a certainty that never left. Even if everything collapses again, I won't be afraid. Because now I know, when everything seems finished, God is preparing a new beginning. With the noise quieted, I can look back without fear. No open wounds, only scars that tell stories. Each has a name, a date, a memory. I hid them for years. Now I hold them gently. They mark a journey I didn't ask for, but needed. They are living proof I survived, that God was there, that nothing was wasted. I smile when I remember the time I thought it was all over, not out of pride, but gratitude. I understood nothing then. I understand everything now. God didn't remove the pain quickly, because pain became the doorway for His love. If He had rescued me sooner, I might not have learned to recognize Him. He let me reach the bottom so I could learn to see the sky from a different angle. Life isn't a straight line from start to finish. It's a circle of meetings and lessons. You rise, you fall, and you return to the same truth. There is no final ending for those who believe. What looks like loss transforms. What dies gives birth to something new. A soul doesn't mature by avoiding suffering, but by turning it into wisdom. I went back to the place where it all began, the spot where I sat when I thought life had ended. Sunset again. I sat in silence and watched the sky burn orange. Everything was the same, and nothing was the same. I closed my eyes and remembered the fatigue, the sadness, the heavy silence. Now that silence sounded different. It was peace. Same place, same person, new heart. I thought of all the times I tried to hurry God, my complaints, my demands. If things had gone my way, I would have missed the best. God never gets time wrong. He waits until you're ready for what He's prepared. The miracle didn't arrive late. It arrived at the exact moment I could receive it. As the sun slipped down, gratitude filled me beyond words. For pain, for delay, for long nights and tears. For those who arrived and those who left, even for God's silences, which I now knew were labor. While I cried, He was building something inside me. Then I understood. The greatest miracle wasn't leaving the tunnel, it was meeting Him inside it. God didn't wait at the finish, He walked the whole way. I knew it from the small signs, unexplainable peace, timely words, strength on the darkest days. I knew it because, even when I couldn't see Him, I felt someone holding me. Now I live differently. I don't need certainty to have hope. Faith is enough. Faith not learned from wins, but from falls. Every morning I say, thank you for still being here. Not because I doubt it, but because I want to remember it. The memory of the miracle keeps humility and wonder alive. I've come to see miracles aren't interruptions of reality. They are reality unveiled. Moments when the veil lifts and you see God's love as it truly is. Constant, patient, eternal. It doesn't depend on everything going right. It's present when everything breaks, when there seems no exit. I learned it late, and right on time. When everything seems finished, something sacred is about to be born. So I walk unhurried now, eyes open, heart awake. Hard days will return, new losses will come, trials I won't understand, but I won't fear. When I feel things collapsing, I'll remember. I've lived an ending before, and it was a beginning. Sometimes at night, I step onto the balcony and watch the stars. In that silence that once hurt, I now hear a whisper. See? I told you. You were never alone. I smile. I don't need more signs. The miracle isn't only in the sky. The miracle is recognizing that voice, and that is how this story ends. Though really, it doesn't. Because every day I wake and choose to trust, the miracle happens again.